After what felt like an eternity of waiting, Wei Wuxian was finally about to face Lan Wangji. As their gazes briefly crossed, Wei Wuxian playfully winked. For a moment, Lan Wangji's sword stance faltered, and his sword, Bichen, nearly slipped from his hand. Outwardly, Wei Wuxian appeared exceedingly cheerful, but inwardly, he was seething with frustration. Time was up. The two duelists bowed to each other as a courtesy, stepped back 3 steps, and then turned to face their next opponent. Just at that moment, a voice called out, "Stop!" At Lan Qiren's command, everyone returned to their ranks. Wei Wuxian let out a surprised, "Huh?" wondering why the session had stopped just when it was his turn to face Little Old-Fashioned. The young students knelt on the ground. Lan Qiren called names one by one, and those called would step forward for a one-on-one assessment. Finally seeing a chance for serious action, Wei Wuxian was full of energy. Among the group of anxious teenagers, he was the only one who seemed excited. The defeated party would not only face Lan Qiren's iconic stern expression, but also receive a unique critique, harsh public reprimands. Such an honor was enough to leave one feeling frustrated for an entire week. Lan Wangji. A murmur of discussion spread below, and Wei Wuxian quickly became watchful and strained his ears to eavesdrop. Zhe Wujun isn't here again. I wonder which unlucky soul will face Han Guangjun. It turned out that Qing Hengjun had not been involved in family affairs for years. Most of the matters of the Gusu Lan clan were handled by Lan Qiren. As the future head of the family, Lan Xichen had reached the age to begin taking on family responsibilities, so it was only a matter of time before he fully took over. Thus, he was arranged to study the ways of family leadership and did not need to attend all the regular classes with the other clan disciples. Hey, anyway, it's not me. I've already gone once. What are you so happy about, as if it wasn't you who just got criticized harshly? Well, it's still better than facing Lan Wangji. He doesn't hold back against anyone. Sigh. A nightmare first thing in the morning. Look, there's an idiot raising his hand. Who's got a death wish? Shh. Don't talk nonsense. It's the new second Mrs. Lan. Is it Wei Ying from the Yunming Jiang clan? This should be interesting. I wonder if he can beat Lan Wangji. How is that possible? Among the peers of the cultivation world, who could possibly defeat Lan Wangji? If someone could, I'd eat my shoes. Wei Wuxian had been raising his hand for a long time, his arm going sore. However, every time Lan Qiren's eyes glanced over at him, he would deliberately skip over him. Whenever Lan Qiren looked around, the other students would lower their heads, as if wilting, while he remained standing tall and unyielding. Wei Ying. Perhaps the name was difficult for him to say, as Lan Qiren's mouth twitched, shooing Wei Wuxian away like a fly on his shoulder. That fly happily landed beside Lan Wangji. Lan Wangji remained calm and serene, nodding in greeting to Wei Wuxian. The smile on Wei Wuxian's face crooked slightly as he returned the greeting. Suibian came out of its sheath with a ringing sound. Before long, the swordplay became a dazzling blur. Lan Wangji's swordsmanship was steady and profound, and he had a solid stance. No matter how Wei Wuxian lunged left or darted right, Lan Wangji countered each move with precision. In the way of the sword, there is a saying, 3 parts sword, 7 parts footwork. While hand technique appears unpredictable, in reality it is not as difficult to master as footwork. With excellent footwork, one can maintain a calm and composed demeanor, facing any incoming onslaught with tranquil ease. This was the approach Lan Wangji used against Wei Wuxian, controlling the movement with stillness. Wei Wuxian, on the other hand, was the complete opposite, his movements extremely agile. However, his agility was not without method. Like a nimble fish, his movements were light, yet precise. If his agility were to become too light and ethereal, it would lack force, turning from a wild storm into a gentle spring breeze. Wei Wuxian's swordsmanship, though based on the sword techniques often associated with female cultivators, did not harness the full potential of male strength. When facing formidable opponents, such techniques would often stop short, lacking the capability to completely break through defenses. Therefore, his movements needed to contain power. He had to ensure that his spiritual energy kept up with his physical agility. This presented a challenge because if he wanted both sword strength and spiritual energy to keep up, his sword speed would inevitably be difficult to maintain, a fundamental contradiction. The method to overcome this contradiction, however, was simple in theory. One must train both sword strength and spiritual energy to exceedingly high levels, achieving powerful sword strikes and abundant spiritual energy. Therefore, achieving this speed might look simple, but it actually has underlying requirements. It particularly requires the swordsman to have a foundation of explosive power. The seemingly omnipresent, light, and ethereal fast sword actually demands more power than a slow sword. In deceptive movements, one must seamlessly conserve and store energy, while in true strikes, the force must be as sudden and overwhelming as a summer thunderstorm to overwhelm the opponent. When facing Lan Wangji, many young disciples had experienced their fair share of embarrassing defeats. During private training sessions and exchanges, they also summarized various styles and techniques tailored to counter Lan Wangji's unique characteristics. The fast swordmanship was one such technique among many, but like all other methods, it generally proved ineffective against a true master. However, a fast sword like Wei Wuxian's, so quick that it matched Lan Wangji blow, was unheard of. This left everyone momentarily speechless, stunned, and in awe. The spectators watching beneath the platform now held Wei Wuxian in high regard, viewing him with both respect and reverence. However, the person on the stage, Wei Wuxian himself, was extremely frustrated. After having sparred with Lan Wangji several times, this little old-fashioned had already seen through his unpredictable approach and the nuances of switching between offense and defense. Lan Wangji had even devised strategies to counter his techniques, making it exceedingly difficult for Wei Wuxian to catch him off guard now. But Wei Wuxian was full of tricks and had an exceptionally thick skin. In addition to straightforward and honorable combat, he had no qualms about using all sorts of cunning and underhanded tactics, employing them with great skill and finding immense enjoyment in it. When his physical prowess fell short, he resorted to verbal tactics. He pulled back from his fierce offensive, pretending to be at a disadvantage, and took the opportunity to move close to Lan Wangji. In a voice only he could hear, he whispered, "Little old-fashioned, do you know what mischief you got up to last night after you got drunk?" Earlier, while they were serving tea to their elders, Wei Wuxian's uninhibited accusations had already caught Lan Wangji's attention. He just hadn't had the chance to ask about it clearly until now. Although he suspected Wei Wuxian was up to no good when starting this conversation, he couldn't help but ask, What did I do?" Wei Wuxian replied, "Little old-fashioned, you weren't the least bit stoic last night. You were quite unrestrained." Wei Wuxian emphasized the word unrestrained. As Lan Wangji was momentarily taken aback by these words, Wei Wuxian smirked and, with a swift motion, cut off one of Lan Wangji's clothes ties. Lan Wangji anticipated an attack, but he didn't expect Wei Wuxian to engage in such a teasing gesture. His face tightened with a faint color, looking a mix of embarrassment and frustration. His tone became more intense as he adjusted his sword stance and attacked again. "What exactly did I do?" Wei Wuxian, fully aware of what Lan Wangji was thinking, observed his every move and easily dodged the attack. He continued, "Last night, you first tried to pull me into the bathtub, insisting that I bathe with you. When that didn't work, while I was asleep, you forcibly pulled me into your arms. When I tried to struggle, you bit my neck like a mad dog. I'm most afraid of that, so I couldn't resist at all. Who would have thought you'd go even further, touching me all over? The entire night you kissed, hugged, bit, and held me. Lan Wangji, your well-reputed elegance and restraint were nowhere to be seen on our wedding night. Who would believe it if I told them? A perfectly decent young man like me was utterly ruined by you. Do you think I'm unjustly treated?" His voice was already very pleasant to hear, and when he spoke these words, there was a mix of 3 parts embarrassment and 7 parts reproach. As it fell on Lan Wangji's ears, it was as if it tantalizingly grazed his eardrums like a delicate touch. Even though Lan Wangji had anticipated that he might have been indiscreet due to drunkenness, And despite being wary of Wei Wuxian's exaggerated behavior, his mind was still unstable. He could not strike Wei Wuxian hard anymore. He quickly fell into a disadvantage within a few moves. Seeing Lan Wangji fall for it, Wei Wuxian didn't aim for his vital points. He only wanted to publicly embarrass him to vent his own frustration. He deliberately slashed Lan Wangji's clothing ties, causing his collar to fall open and reveal a stretch of his chest. The dark red spot on his chest was barely concealed, becoming visible whenever he leaned forward. The inner garment at his waist was shredded, hanging in tatters. A line of muscle extending from his waist to his lower abdomen was visible, stirring imaginations. "Stop!" What started as a proper duel between the two soon became an intimate, whisper-filled playing. Each move clearly showed their closeness, with their heads almost touching and their temples brushing against each other. Their swords, Bichen and Suibian, seemed entwined, resembling a teasing entanglement between lovers. Lan Wangji's clothes were in tatters, barely covering his body, and an indecent atmosphere overflowed. This infuriated Lan Qiren, who loudly shouted for a stop. The boys had never seen Lan Wangji in such a disheveled state. Their worldview was completely turned upside down. Watching the two not seeming like they were fighting and seeing their teacher furiously chase them away to kneel in punishment, they were bewildered and confused. What is going on? How did they start playing around while fighting? It's like they are doing Tai Chi. Is this some new swordmanship that we don't understand? I have no idea.